Remember the ancient days, and bear in mind the years of past generations. Ask your father, and he will inform you, or inquire of your elders, and they will tell you of the time when El Elyon, God Most High, gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided up humankind and set the boundaries of the people according to the number of the divine council. But Yahweh's portion is his people. Israel is his special possession. Deuteronomy 32, 7 through 9. Today, I want to tell you the story of how Yahweh chose a people for himself. This is the story of Abram. The account of Abram begins with a genealogy. While genealogies often seem arbitrary to the modern reader, I want to show you why this one is essential to understanding this tale. After the record of the Tower of Babel, when God disinherited the nations, there is a list of names recorded in Genesis. These names are the descendants of Noah's son Shem. The genealogy shows that Abram is the 10th in the line of Shem. I want you to keep this important fact in mind as the story moves along. I will save the revelation of why it is important until a bit later, but I will give you a hint. Yahweh's choice to call Abram was not random. Now Abram lived in a Mesopotamian city known as Ur. With him in Ur lived Abram's father Terah and his brothers Nahor and Haran. We are also told that Abram was married to Sarai, his half-sister, and that Sarai was unable to bear children. Though this may seem like a random detail, keep in mind the genealogy that begins the story. The author of this account places the detail here to inform the reader that Abram's family line is currently unable to carry on. In Abram's family, there was also his nephew Lot and his niece Milcah, both of whom were the children of Haran. Nahor, Abram's other brother, actually took Milcah as his wife. While these family marriages may seem strange in our minds, this was likely a normal practice in ancient times. Additionally, such marriages were not prohibited by the law yet because the law had not been written. In fact, Israel itself had not yet been formed. At this point in history, Yahweh did not have a nation of his own. After the incident at the Tower of Babel, Yahweh forced mankind to disperse throughout the earth. Once he had done this, he gave up the newfound nations who had abandoned him to be in the charge of other spirits, who are not necessarily benevolent. Think of Daniel 10 with the princes of Persia and Greece, or Ephesians 6 with the rulers, authorities, and cosmic powers over this present darkness. However, Yahweh did not immediately choose a people for himself. This doesn't mean that Yahweh was unknown to anyone during the years between Shem and Abram. This is made clear by the existence of the king of Salem, Melchizedek, who was also a priest of El Elyon, God Most High. Abram will meet him in a later story. Clearly, Yahweh was known to others in the world during this time. However, it was Abram, the descendant of Shem, that Yahweh called. At last, the time had come for Yahweh to create a nation of his own. This was the beginning of the reversal of Babel, because through this new nation, Yahweh would provide a Messiah who would supply a way for the nations of the earth to come back to himself. So the glory of Yahweh appeared before Abram while he was still in Ur, and Yahweh said to him, "Go out from your country, your homeland, and your family, to the land that I will show you. Then I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will exemplify divine blessing. I will bless those who bless you, but the one who curses you I will curse. And all the families of the earth will bless one another by your name." So Abram told his family what Yahweh had said to him. Nahor and Milcah chose to remain in Ur, but Terah, Sarai, and Lot went with Abram. Haran had died in Ur, which may explain why Lot, Haran's son, chose to go with Abram rather than to remain in Ur. Abram, Sarai, Terah, and Lot set out from Ur to the land of Canaan to settle there. But once they arrived in the city of Haran, which was in northern Mesopotamia, they resided there for a while until Terah reached the end of his days and died. Once Terah had departed to Sheol, Abram continued his journey and proceeded southwest to Canaan, as Yahweh had instructed him. Sarah and Lot were still with Abram, in addition to all their possessions and servants they had acquired in Haran. Abram was 75 years old when he left the city of Haran, with 100 years of life still left to live. Abram traveled through the land of Canaan to Shechem. For perspective, Shechem is about halfway between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. But there was a problem when Abram entered Canaan. It was already occupied by the Canaanites. To understand why this was a problem, we have to remember what happened right after the Great Flood. Noah's son Ham had sinned against Noah, so Noah cursed Ham's son, whose name was Canaan, saying, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of the servants shall Canaan be to his brothers, and blessed be Yahweh the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." As we will see in later stories, the Canaanites were a strong, wicked people. But remember, Abram was a descendant of Shem. This is where the genealogy of Abram to Shem becomes important. The genealogy shows us that Abram is a part of the blessing that was given to Shem by Noah in the midst of the curse on Canaan. In other words, the Canaanites were subject to Abram according to this curse. Whether or not Abram knew this himself is not mentioned. Nevertheless, when Abram saw the Canaanites, it would have seemed extremely unlikely to him that they would willingly give up their land. So Yahweh appeared to Abram at the oak of Moreh in Shechem, and reassured him, saying, "To your offspring I will give this land." After this encounter, Abram formed an altar to Yahweh there to commemorate this theophany. Because of this event, the Oak of Moreh, which means teacher, becomes a sacred site that will appear again multiple times in other Old Testament stories. Now Abram did not remain in Shechem. He and his household moved from there to the hill country between Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. There Abram built another altar to Yahweh and worshipped him. But Abram did not remain in the hill country. He continued his journey through Canaan to the southern region of the land called Negev. But neither did Abram stay in Negev. He ventured south to Egypt as there was a severe famine that overtook the land of Canaan. So Abram and his family took refuge in Egypt until the famine had passed. As they were traveling down to Egypt, a concerning thought came to Abram, and he said to Sarai, "Sarai, I know that you are a beautiful woman. The Egyptians will clearly see this as well, and when they see you, they will want to take you for themselves. If they know we are married, they will kill me so they can take you. To avoid this, you must only reveal to them that you are my sister, but make no mention of our marriage. If you tell them that you are only my sister, they will treat me well and spare my life." Once they arrived in Egypt, the Egyptians did indeed see that Sarai was extremely beautiful. Eventually, Pharaoh's officials saw her, and they praised her before Pharaoh. Of course, Pharaoh, agreeing that she was beautiful, seized her for himself and brought her into his royal harem. And Abram was indeed treated very well as he had predicted. He received sheep, cattle, male donkeys, female servants, male servants, and female donkeys, and camels as a bride payment for Sarai. Interestingly, Sarai is only 10 years younger than Abram, so she is around 65 years old right now. This is when it is important to remember that their lifespans were double ours, so perhaps they aged differently than we do. In fact, this would have been less than middle age for them. Nevertheless, they were still quite old. Now Pharaoh was not enjoying his new bride as he had intended. Because he had taken Sarai into his harem, Yahweh ailed Pharaoh and his household with dreadful plagues and diseases. Eventually, it was revealed to Pharaoh that Sarai wasn't only Abram's half-sister, but also his wife. Angered by this revelation, Pharaoh summoned Abram and said, "What is it on earth that you have done to me? You told me she was your sister, but you did not mention she was also your wife, so I took her to be a wife for myself. Do you see what has happened because of this? Now take your wife and leave this land. Never return here." We are not told why Pharaoh is cursed, even though it was Abram who held part of the truth from Pharaoh. Since Sarai was truly Abram's half-sister, Abram's lie was by omission. It wasn't a flat-out lie as many often assume. It could be that Abram was simply acting in self-preservation, knowing that the Egyptians would have actually killed him if they knew Sarai was his wife, and that holding this truth from Pharaoh would have been the greater of the goods compared to revealing that he was married to Sarai. Regardless, although Abram's actions may seem strange to a modern reader, Yahweh was just in bringing affliction on Pharaoh and not Abram or Sarai. So Pharaoh's men expelled Abram, Sarai, and Lot from Egypt, as Pharaoh had commanded. However, they were allowed to bring all their possessions they had amassed in Egypt with them. They had accumulated so many possessions there that Abram was considered to be rich with livestock, silver, and gold. What had begun as a simple escape from a famine ended with Abram and his family returning to Canaan with abundance. From Egypt, they journeyed back north to Negev, but Abram didn't stay in Negev. He traveled back to the hill land between Bethel and Ai, where he had built an altar to Yahweh. Once again, as he had done before, he worshipped Yahweh there. The music in this episode is by Dexter Britton, Kai Engel, and Kevin MacLeod. The Bible versions I use are a mix between the ESV and the Lexham English Bible. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast, as it is my first podcast, and I would love to know if you learned anything from this podcast, what you liked about it, and if there's anything that would make you want to listen to it more, or if there's anything you think I should change. That would be great to know, and I appreciate your feedback. Thanks.